The apartment building on Sakura Street looked like any other in the quiet Tokyo suburb. 5 stories of pale concrete, small balconies with drying laundry, and a row of bicycles locked near the entrance. Nothing special. Nothing that would make you look twice. On the 3rd floor, apartment 304 had been occupied for exactly 6 months. The woman who lived there kept to herself. Her name was Yuki Tanaka. At least that's what the nameplate on her mailbox said. She was 38 years old. Average height, with short dark hair usually tied back in a simple ponytail. Most mornings she'd leave around 9 carrying a laptop bag. Some evenings she'd return with groceries from the corner store. A normal life. Or so it seemed. Mrs. Kobayashi, who lived in apartment 302, sometimes saw her in the hallway. "Good morning," Yuki would say with a polite bow. Always respectful. Always quiet. But Mrs. Kobayashi noticed something odd. The woman's eyes. They were always moving, always watching, like she was seeing things other people couldn't see. And she never, ever looked tired. Even at 6 in the morning, those eyes were sharp and alert. "She says she's a translator," Mrs. Kobayashi told her husband one evening over dinner. "Works from home mostly. Does online meetings with foreign companies." "Sounds normal enough," her husband replied, not looking up from his newspaper. "I suppose," Mrs. Kobayashi said, though something in her voice suggested she wasn't convinced. The building superintendent, an older man named Takeshi, had his own observations. He'd been managing the building for 20 years and prided himself on knowing his tenants. But this one puzzled him. She paid her rent on time, never complained, never caused trouble, yet there was something different about her. The way she walked, maybe. Smooth and balanced like a cat. And when he'd helped her move in, he'd been surprised by how light she traveled. Just a few boxes, a small couch, a bed. No photographs, no decorations. No personal touches at all. Probably just got divorced, he'd told himself. Starting over. But 6 months later, the apartment still looked the same. Minimal. Almost military in its simplicity. The first real concern came from Mr. Ishida in apartment 404, directly above Yuki's place. He was a middle school teacher, usually asleep by 10. But lately, he'd been waking up to strange sounds from below. Thuds. Regular rhythmic thuds. Sometimes at 2 in the morning. Sometimes at 4. He'd press his ear to the floor and listen. It sounded like someone hitting something. Over and over. Punching maybe, kicking. After 3 weeks of interrupted sleep, he'd finally had enough. He called the building superintendent. "There's something wrong with the woman downstairs," Mr. Ishida said, his voice tired and frustrated. "She's doing something at night. Exercise maybe, but it's loud. And it's always in the middle of the night. What kind of person exercises at 3 in the morning?" Takeshi promised to look into it. He knocked on Yuki's door that afternoon. She answered quickly, dressed in casual clothes, her face pleasant and open. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "The tenant above you has mentioned some noise," Takeshi said carefully. "Late at night. I wanted to check if everything was all right." Yuki's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Just for a second. "I apologize," she said smoothly. "I've been doing some late-night workouts. Insomnia, you understand. I'll be more careful about the noise." "Thank you for understanding," Takeshi said, bowing slightly. She bowed back and closed the door. The conversation had lasted less than 2 minutes. But Takeshi walked away feeling like he'd just been dismissed by someone used to giving orders, not taking them. The noise continued. Quieter now, but still there. Mr. Ishida bought earplugs, then came the packages. Regular deliveries, always arriving during the day when most residents were at work. The delivery drivers would leave them at her door, and they'd be gone within minutes. Large boxes, small boxes, padded envelopes. Mrs. Kobayashi, who spent most of her day at home, started keeping track. 3 packages in 1 week. 4 the next. Always different courier companies. Always handled quickly and quietly. Maybe she runs an online business. Mrs. Kobayashi suggested to the other neighbors during a building meeting. Or maybe she's buying things she shouldn't be buying. Mr. Ishida muttered. It was Mr. Watanabe from apartment 201 who finally made the call. He was a retired postal worker, 67 years old, with strong opinions about right and wrong. He'd noticed all the same things the others had. The odd hours, the packages, the way Yuki seemed to appear and disappear at strange times. Once he'd seen her return to the building at dawn, wearing dark clothing and moving like a shadow. Something's not right, he told his wife. That woman is hiding something. His wife tried to calm him down, but Mr. Watanabe had made up his mind. He called the local police station and filed a report. Suspicious activity, possible illegal goods, strange behavior. The officer on the phone had been polite but non-committal. "We'll look into it, sir. Thank you for the information." Mr. Watanabe hung up, satisfied he'd done his civic duty. 3 weeks passed before anything happened. Then one morning, Detective Hiroshi Yamamoto arrived at the station to find the case file on his desk. He was 42, 15 years on the force, and had seen his share of neighbor disputes and false alarms. But something about this case made him pause. Multiple reports from different residents, consistent patterns. And when he ran the woman's name through the system, nothing came up. No prior addresses in Japan. No employment records. No tax history before 6 months ago. It was like she'd appeared out of nowhere. He assigned 2 officers to conduct surveillance. They watched the building for 2 weeks, taking photos, noting patterns. Yuki Tanaka left her apartment at irregular hours. Sometimes she'd be gone for days. When she returned, she'd often be carrying nothing but a small backpack. The photos showed a woman who moved with purpose, who checked her surroundings constantly, who never used her phone on the street. "She's trained," one of the officers told Yamamoto. "Military or security, maybe." Yamamoto requested more information from immigration. The record showed Yuki had entered Japan 6 months ago on a work visa, sponsored by a translation company that, upon investigation, barely existed. A shell company with 1 employee and no office. The detective's instincts kicked in. This wasn't just a strange neighbor. This was someone actively hiding something. He brought the case to his captain, presenting everything they'd found. The captain listened, reviewed the file, and made a decision. They would apply for a warrant. Given the suspicious activity, the false documentation, and the potential security risk, a judge might approve it. 3 days later, the warrant came through. No-knock authorization, approved for early morning execution when the suspect would most likely be home. Yamamoto assembled a tactical team. 6 officers, full gear, prepared for any scenario. They gathered in the parking lot at 3:30 in the morning, running through the plan one final time. The building was dark and silent. Most residents were asleep. At exactly 4 o'clock, they moved into position. 2 officers at the back exit, 4 at the front door of apartment 304. Yamamoto stood back, hand on his radio, watching. The lead officer raised his hand. 3 fingers. 2. 1. The battering ram swung forward and the door exploded inward with a crash that echoed through the entire building. Lights flickered on in neighboring apartments. Someone screamed, and inside apartment 304, the woman they knew as Yuki Tanaka stood waiting in the darkness, perfectly still, perfectly calm, as if she'd been expecting them all along. The door hung off its hinges. Splinters of wood scattered across the entryway. 4 officers poured through the opening, flashlights cutting through the darkness like blades. Their boots thundered against the floor as they spread out, weapons raised, voices sharp and commanding. "Police! Don't move! Show us your hands!" In the center of the small living room stood Yuki Tanaka. She wore simple black workout clothes, hair pulled back, feet bare. Her hands rose slowly above her head, palms open and visible. But it was her face that made Detective Yamamoto pause at the doorway. No fear, no surprise, no panic. Just a calm, measuring gaze that swept across each officer, reading them, assessing them, calculating something he couldn't quite understand. She looked like someone who'd been through this before. Many times before, on the ground now, Officer Sato shouted, his voice tight with adrenaline. Yuki dropped to her knees with controlled precision, then lowered herself face down on the floor, hands behind her head. The movement was smooth, practiced, almost military. Officer Sato moved in to cuff her while 2 others swept through the apartment, clearing each room. Bedroom clear. Bathroom clear. Kitchen clear. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a combined kitchen and living area. It took less than 30 seconds to confirm she was alone. Yamamoto stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The place was almost unnaturally clean. No clutter, no mess. Everything in its place. But what drew his attention were the items lined up against one wall. A heavy punching bag hanging from a reinforced ceiling mount. Rubber floor mats. Weight plates stacked in perfect order. This wasn't normal home exercise equipment. This was serious training gear. "Get her up," Yamamoto said quietly. Two officers pulled Yuki to her feet. She stood straight, balanced, her breathing steady despite being handcuffed. Most people in this situation would be shaking, crying, demanding to know what was happening. She just watched them with those sharp dark eyes. "Yuki Tanaka?" Yamamoto asked. "Yes. We have a warrant to search these premises. Do you understand?" "I understand." Her Japanese was perfect, no accent, no hesitation. "May I ask what you're looking for?" "We'll ask the questions," Yamamoto said, though her calmness was already unsettling him. He nodded to his team. "Search everything." The officers moved through the apartment methodically. They opened cabinets, checked drawers, looked under furniture. In the bedroom closet, Officer Nakamura found the first real evidence. He whistled low and called out, "Detective, you need to see this." Yamamoto walked into the bedroom. The closet door stood open, revealing neatly organized shelves. On the top shelf sat several locked cases. Nakamura had opened one. Inside, nestled in foam padding, was communication equipment. Not the kind you'd buy at an electronics store. Military-grade radio devices, encrypted phones, equipment with labels in English. "Check the others," Yamamoto ordered. The next case contained tactical gear, night vision equipment, a vest with reinforced plating, gloves designed for combat. The third case held what looked like surveillance equipment. Cameras, recording devices, GPS units. "What is all this?" Officer Sato asked, pulling out the tactical vest. Yamamoto turned to look at Yuki, who remained standing in the living room between two officers. "You want to explain?" "I'd like to make a phone call," she said calmly. "You'll get your phone call after we finish here. I need to make it now. It's important." "Everything's important to suspects," Yamamoto said, walking back into the living room. "What is all that equipment for?" "Who are you, really?" Yuki's jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in her composure. "I'm asking respectfully. Let me make one phone call, please. After we search the apartment, Detective Yamamoto." She said his name clearly, having read it from his badge. "I'm not who you think I am. That phone call will explain everything, but we're wasting time, and every minute you delay makes this situation worse. For both of us." Something in her tone made him pause, not threatening, not pleading, just stating a fact. He studied her face, looking for deception, for fear, for anything that would tell him what he was dealing with, but she just stared back, waiting. "One call," he said finally, "but we listened to every word. I expected nothing less." "My phone is in the bedroom." "On the nightstand." Officer Nakamura retrieved it, a standard smartphone, newer model, nothing unusual about it from the outside. He handed it to Yamamoto, who unlocked the cuffs on one of Yuki's hands, keeping the other secured. "Speaker mode," he instructed. Yuki took the phone and scrolled through her contacts with her thumb. She selected a number with no name attached, just a series of digits. The phone rang twice before someone answered. "Go ahead," a man's voice said in English. American accent. Deep and professional. "This is Tanaka. I have a situation. Japanese National Police executed a search warrant on my location approximately 5 minutes ago. I need immediate liaison." Silence on the other end. Then status? "Secured but unharmed." "They found the equipment." "Understood. Put whoever's in charge on the line." Yuki held out the phone to Yamamoto. "He wants to speak with you." Yamamoto took the phone cautiously. "This is Detective Yamamoto, Tokyo Metropolitan Police." "Detective, my name is Colonel Richard Hayes, United States Defense Department. I'm going to give you a number for the American Embassy in Tokyo. You need to call it immediately. Ask for the defense attaché's office. Tell them you have a situation involving a U.S. military asset." "Can you do that?" "Military asset?" Yamamoto felt his stomach drop. "What are you talking about?" "I can't discuss details on an unsecured line, but I strongly suggest you make that call before this goes any further. The woman you have in custody is not a criminal. She's an active duty member of the United States military on official business in Japan. This is going to become a diplomatic situation very quickly if it's not handled properly." Yamamoto looked at Yuki, who stood perfectly still, her face unreadable. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "Call the embassy. They'll confirm everything. In the meantime, I suggest you treat Captain Tanaka with the respect her rank deserves." "Captain." The word hung in the air like a bomb. "I'll make the call," Yamamoto said slowly. "But she's not going anywhere until I get confirmation. I wouldn't expect anything different." "The embassy number is," Yamamoto wrote it down, his hand shaking slightly. When the call ended, he stood there for a moment, staring at his notes. His team was watching him, confused and waiting for orders. "Keep searching," he said finally, "and someone get me a secure line. We need to call the American embassy." The next hour became a blur of phone calls and waiting. The defense attaché confirmed what Colonel Hayes had said. Yes, they had an American military member operating in Japan. Yes, they were aware of her presence. No, they couldn't discuss details. They were sending representatives immediately. While they waited, the search continued. In a locked drawer in the bedroom, they found passports. 3 of them, all with Yuki's photo but different names. American passport, Japanese passport, Canadian passport. Each one looked completely legitimate. "What are you?" Officer Sato whispered, staring at the documents. "Some kind of spy?" Yuki, still standing in the living room, heard the question but didn't answer. She simply looked out the window at the slowly lightening sky, her expression distant as if she was thinking about something far away. By 6 in the morning, the apartment was crowded. Embassy officials had arrived. Then military personnel in civilian clothes but with unmistakable bearing. They spoke quietly with Yamamoto in the hallway while Yuki remained inside, finally uncuffed but still under watch. When Yamamoto came back in, his face was pale. He approached Yuki slowly, like someone approaching a dangerous animal they'd mistaken for a pet. "Captain Tanaka," he said formally, using her rank for the first time, "I need you to tell me exactly who you are. No more secrets. Your own people have authorized you to brief me on your status." Yuki looked at him for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath and began to speak. "My full name is Yuki Tanaka Morrison. I'm a captain in the United States Army. My unit is the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta." She paused, watching his face. "You might know it by another name. Delta Force." The room went completely silent. Outside, the morning sun was rising over Tokyo, and Detective Yamamoto realized that his quiet neighborhood case had just become something far bigger than he'd ever imagined. Detective Yamamoto had heard of Delta Force. Everyone had. Movies, television shows, whispered stories about America's most elite soldiers, the ones who went places no one else could go, the ones who did things no one else could do. But standing in front of him wasn't some Hollywood action hero. It was a woman barely over 5 feet tall, wearing workout clothes, with tired eyes and calluses on her hands. "You're telling me you're with Delta Force," Yamamoto said slowly, trying to process the information. "One of America's most secret military units." "Yes." "And you've been living in my district for 6 months." "Yes." "Doing what exactly?" Yuki glanced at the American officials standing near the doorway. A man in his 50s wearing a dark suit gave her a slight nod. Permission to speak, apparently. "I'm on medical leave," Yuki said, recovering from injuries sustained during an operation in Southeast Asia. "I was coordinating intelligence activities while healing, but primarily I was just trying to rest." "Those don't look like the activities of someone resting," Officer Sato said, pointing at the equipment still laid out on the floor. "Old habits," Yuki replied quietly. "I couldn't sleep. Haven't been able to sleep properly in years. So I train. It helps with the nightmares." The way she said it so matter-of-fact made the room feel suddenly smaller. Yamamoto had seen combat veterans before. He recognized that particular kind of exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that came from seeing too much. "How long have you been in the military?" he asked. 20 years. "Since I was 18. And Delta Force?" 10 years. One of the embassy officials stepped forward. "Detective, if we could speak privately." "No," Yamamoto said firmly. "Not yet. I need to understand what's happening here. My men and I just broke into the home of an American soldier, an allied nation's military personnel. This is going to create problems. Big problems. Before anyone starts talking about diplomatic immunity and jurisdictional issues, I need to know the truth." The embassy official looked uncomfortable, but Yuki spoke up. "He's right. They deserve an explanation." She walked over to the couch and sat down slowly, wincing slightly. For the first time, Yamamoto noticed she was favoring her left side. "An injury, not fully healed. My mother was Japanese," Yuki began. "From Osaka. She met my father when he was stationed in Japan with the U.S. Air Force. They got married, moved to California when I was 2. I grew up in both worlds, speaking both languages, feeling like I belonged to both countries and neither at the same time." She paused, looking down at her hands. "When I was 18, I joined the army. Not because I was patriotic or wanted to serve. I just wanted to prove something. To myself mostly, that I was strong enough. Tough enough. That being small, being a woman, being half Japanese in a very American military, that none of it mattered. And did you prove it? Yamamoto asked. A thin smile crossed her face. I made it through basic training. Then infantry school. Then I earned my Ranger tab. I was one of the first women to complete that course. After that, I spent 5 years with the 75th Ranger Regiment, and then I tried out for Delta Force. Officer Nakamura, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I thought Delta Force didn't accept women. They didn't. Not officially. Not until about 12 years ago, when the military started allowing women to compete for special operations positions. Even then, the selection course was designed to break people. Most men don't make it through. The failure rate is over 90%. But you made it, Yamamoto said, barely. It took me 3 tries. The first time I quit on day 4. Just gave up. The second time I got injured and had to withdraw. The third time I made it all the way through. 6 months of the hardest physical and mental challenges I've ever faced. When I finally passed, I became one of the first women in Delta Force. And the first of Japanese descent. The room was completely quiet. Even the embassy officials seemed to be listening closely, as if hearing parts of the story they hadn't known before. For the past 10 years, Yuki continued, I've deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, and half a dozen countries I can't name. I've done things I can't talk about, with people whose names I can't say. And 8 months ago, during an operation, things went wrong. I took shrapnel to my side and back. Spent 2 months in a military hospital in Germany. When I was finally cleared to leave, they gave me options. Retire with full benefits or take extended medical leave to recover and decide if I wanted to continue. So you came to Japan, Yamamoto said. I came home, Yuki corrected him softly. My mother died 5 years ago. Cancer. I couldn't get leave to see her before she passed. That's one of the costs of this job. You miss everything. Weddings, funerals, birthdays. Your friends move on without you. Your family learns to stop expecting you at holidays. You become a ghost in your own life. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood that was now fully awake. People were heading to work, children walking to school, life continuing normally. I came to Japan to remember what normal felt like. To walk streets my mother walked. To eat food she ate. To hear the language she taught me. I rented this apartment under my mother's maiden name, Tanaka, because I wanted to feel close to her again. And the equipment? Yamamoto pressed. The multiple passports? The encryption devices? Standard issue for someone in my position. Even on medical leave, I maintain my security clearance. I coordinate with my unit. Provide intelligence assessments when needed. The passports are for emergency extraction if something goes wrong. The training equipment is because I don't know how to stop being a soldier, even when I'm trying to heal. One of the American officials cleared his throat. Detective, we should discuss. I'm not finished, Yamamoto said sharply. He turned back to Yuki. The anonymous tip. Someone reported you. Suspicious activity, they said. Who would do that? Yuki's expression hardened. Intelligence suggests it came from a hostile foreign service. They've been tracking American special operations personnel throughout Asia. Someone identified me, probably through facial recognition at an airport or train station. They couldn't attack me directly without causing an international incident, but they could expose my location, make my presence here untenable, which is exactly what happened. So this was all a setup, Officer Sato said, to force you out of Japan. Essentially, yes. Yamamoto felt anger rising in his chest. Not at Yuki, but at the situation. His department had been used, manipulated into breaking into the home of an allied soldier, all because someone wanted to play intelligence games. Why didn't you tell us who you were from the beginning? He asked. Why let this happen? Because my mission protocols require maintaining cover unless absolutely necessary to break it. Because I hoped you'd search the apartment, find nothing illegal and leave. Because every time my identity becomes known, I become less effective at my job. And because, she added quietly, I'm tired of running, tired of hiding. Maybe part of me wanted this to happen. Wanted someone to finally see who I really am. The honesty in her voice cut through all the diplomatic doublespeak and military formality. Here was a woman who'd spent 20 years serving, 10 years in the most dangerous places on Earth. and she'd done it all while carrying the weight of being a pioneer. The first woman, the first Japanese American, always having to prove herself. Always having to be better, stronger, faster than everyone else just to be considered equal. Yamamoto felt something shift inside him. An hour ago, he'd thought he was investigating a criminal. Now he was standing in front of a decorated war hero who'd sacrificed more than he could imagine. "I owe you an apology," he said formally. "This operation was conducted based on false intelligence. You should never have been treated this way." "You were doing your job," Yuki replied. "No apology necessary." But Yamamoto bowed deeply anyway. A gesture of respect he meant with his whole heart. His officers, after a moment's hesitation, did the same. When he straightened up, he saw tears in Yuki's eyes. Just for a moment before she blinked them away. The warrior showing a flash of the human beneath. "What happens now?" he asked the embassy officials. The man in the dark suit stepped forward, his expression grim. "Now we deal with the consequences. This incident will be reported. Media will likely get hold of the story. Captain Tanaka's identity is compromised. She'll have to return to the United States immediately." Yuki closed her eyes and Yamamoto saw her shoulders drop slightly. She'd come to Japan looking for peace, for connection to her mother, for healing. Instead, she was being forced to leave. "I'm sorry," Yamamoto said quietly. "So am I," Yuki replied. "I really wanted to stay." The next 72 hours felt like living inside a storm. News of the incident leaked within hours, just as the embassy officials had predicted. First it appeared on local news websites, then national television, then international media. The headlines varied, but the story was always the same. Japanese police raid uncovers American Special Forces soldier. Delta Force operative discovered living in Tokyo suburb. Female commando caught in diplomatic incident. Yuki's apartment became ground zero for a media circus. News vans lined the street. Reporters crowded the building entrance. Neighbors who'd barely spoken to her for 6 months suddenly had detailed opinions to share with anyone holding a microphone. "I always knew something was strange about her," Mr. Watanabe told one reporter, puffing up with importance. "Very suspicious behavior. I'm the one who reported it, you know." Mrs. Kobayashi was more sympathetic. "She was always polite, quiet. I feel bad for her now. She was probably just trying to live a normal life." Detective Yamamoto watched the coverage from his office, feeling sick to his stomach. His captain had called him in for 3 separate meetings. The police commissioner wanted a full report. The mayor's office was asking questions. Everyone wanted to know how this had happened, who was responsible, what procedures had failed. "You followed protocol," his captain assured him. "The warrant was legitimate. You had reasonable cause. Nobody's blaming you." But Yamamoto blamed himself. He kept replaying that moment when Yuki had stood in her living room, hands raised, completely calm. She'd known this would happen. Maybe not the specifics, but she'd known her quiet life in Japan couldn't last, and he'd been the one to end it. On the second day, he received an unexpected call. It was one of the American officials from the embassy, requesting a meeting. Not at the police station, not at the embassy, at a small coffee shop in a quiet part of the city. Yamamoto arrived early and took a seat in the back corner. 20 minutes later, Yuki walked in. She wasn't alone. 2 American men in suits flanked her, clearly security. But she was wearing civilian clothes, jeans, and a simple sweater, her hair down for the first time since he'd met her. She looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting across from him. The security detail took a table nearby, close enough to intervene but far enough to give them privacy. "I'm surprised they let you out," Yamamoto said. "They didn't want to, but I insisted. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, and I needed to talk to you before I go." A waitress came over and they ordered coffee in silence. After she left, Yuki leaned forward, her hands wrapped around the table edge. "I want you to understand something," she said. "What happened wasn't your fault. You were set up, manipulated by people playing games you didn't even know existed. Intelligence warfare isn't like regular police work. There are no rules, no boundaries, just people using other people to achieve objectives." "I should have been more careful," Yamamoto said. "Should have verified the information better. You did everything right." The tip came from a source designed to look credible. The surveillance matched patterns that would concern any good detective. You had no way of knowing it was all orchestrated. She paused, taking a breath. "The truth is, I should have been more careful. I got comfortable, let my guard down, started to believe I could have a normal life here. That was my mistake. Wanting a normal life isn't a mistake. It is when you're in my line of work. She looked out the window at people passing by on the street, regular people living regular lives. Do you know what the hardest part of my job is? It's not the combat, not the training, not even the injuries. It's the isolation. You can't tell anyone what you do. Can't form real relationships because you're always lying about who you are. Can't put down roots because you'll be deployed somewhere else in a month. You live your whole life as a stranger, even to yourself. The coffee arrived. Yamamoto watched her add sugar and cream with precise, measured movements. Everything she did had that same careful control, like she was always thinking 3 steps ahead. Tell me something, he said, and be honest. Did you ever actually want to hurt anyone in that apartment building? Were you ever a threat to those neighbors? No, never. They were just regular people living their lives. I actually envied them. Mr. Watanabe with his morning walks and his newspaper. Mrs. Kobayashi and her husband with their quiet routine. Even Mr. Ishida, who complained about the noise. They had something I've never had: stability, normalcy, a place they belonged. You belonged here too. Your mother was Japanese. My mother left Japan when she was 22 and never came back, not even to visit. I used to wonder why when she clearly missed it so much. She'd cook Japanese food, speak Japanese at home, tell me stories about Osaka. But whenever I suggested we visit, she'd change the subject. Yuki's voice grew softer. I think she was afraid that coming back would make her realize she didn't belong here anymore either. That she'd lost both homes by choosing to live between them. Is that how you feel? Like you don't belong anywhere? Yuki was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. I've spent my entire adult life serving the United States. I've bled for that country. Lost friends for that country. Given up any chance at a normal life for that country. But I'm still the Asian woman in a white man's military. Still the outsider, still having to prove myself over and over. She looked up at him. And Japan. Japan is my heritage, my blood, my history. But I'm too American for this place. Too different. 6 months here and I never stopped being that foreign woman to most people. Not to everyone, Yamamoto said gently. Mrs. Kobayashi spoke highly of you on the news. Said you were kind and respectful. A sad smile crossed Yuki's face. That's something, I suppose. They sat in silence for a while, drinking their coffee. Outside, the city moved on with its day. People rushing to work, students heading to school, delivery trucks making their rounds. The normal world that both of them served in different ways but could never quite be part of. Can I ask you something? Yamamoto said finally. Why Delta Force? Why push yourself to join the most elite, most difficult unit in the American military? You'd already proven yourself as a ranger. You could have had a good career without going further. Yuki thought about this, turning her coffee cup in slow circles on the table. When I was in ranger school, one of the instructors told me I'd never make it through. Not because I wasn't capable, but because I was a woman, and the military would never really accept me in combat roles. He said I should quit before I embarrassed myself. She looked directly at Yamamoto. I finished that course and earned my tab. But his words stayed with me. So I decided to go further, to push harder, to prove that all the people who said I couldn't, who said I shouldn't, who said I wasn't good enough, that they were all wrong. And did you prove it? I proved it to everyone except the person who matters most. Who's that? Myself. She finished her coffee and set the cup down with finality. I spent 20 years trying to prove I was good enough, strong enough, tough enough. Fighting so hard to be accepted that I forgot to ask if this was the life I actually wanted. And now here I am, 38 years old with no family, no home, and a body that's held together with scar tissue and stubbornness. Some victory. Yamamoto felt a deep sadness hearing this. Here was a woman who'd achieved things most people couldn't imagine. She'd broken barriers, saved lives, served with honor. But the cost had been everything else. What will you do now? He asked. Go back to the States. Report to my command. They'll probably assign me to training duties while I finish recovering. New recruits need instructors, and I've got plenty of experience to share. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. At least I can help the next generation. Maybe make it a little easier for the women coming up behind me. That's important work. It is. But it's not what I want. She stood up and Yamamoto rose with her. I want what I came to Japan looking for. Peace. A chance to remember who I was before I became a soldier. A connection to my mother and the life she left behind. But I guess some things just aren't meant to be. Yamamoto bowed deeply. For what it's worth, I believe you would have found those things here. Given time, Maybe in another life. She bowed back, then extended her hand Western style. He shook it, feeling the calluses, the strength, the tremor of exhaustion underneath. Thank you, Detective. For treating me with respect when you didn't have to, for listening to my story, for making my last day in Japan feel a little less lonely. It was an honor to meet you, Captain Tanaka. She smiled at the use of her rank, then turned and walked toward the door, her security detail falling in step behind her. Yamamoto watched her go. This warrior woman who'd crossed oceans and broken barriers but still couldn't find a place to call home. The next morning, before dawn, a black car would take her to the airport. By evening, she'd be back in the United States, back to being Captain Yuki Tanaka Morrison of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Back to being the soldier, the operator, the weapon. But for just a moment in that coffee shop in Tokyo, she'd been allowed to be simply Yuki. A woman who missed her mother, who wanted to belong somewhere, who was tired of fighting. And Yamamoto would remember that moment for the rest of his life. 6 months passed before Detective Yamamoto thought about Yuki Tanaka again. Not that he'd forgotten her. You don't forget someone like that. But life had moved on, as it always does. New cases came across his desk. The apartment building on Sakura Street returned to its quiet routine. The media circus packed up and found other stories to chase. Even Mr. Watanabe stopped bragging about his role in uncovering an American spy, especially after learning he'd actually helped expose an Allied soldier. Then one morning in late spring, a package arrived at the police station. Small, carefully wrapped, addressed to Detective Hiroshi Yamamoto. No return address, but the postmark was from Virginia, United States. Yamamoto opened it at his desk, curious and slightly cautious. Inside was a wooden box, simple but beautifully made. He lifted the lid and found 2 items resting on velvet padding. The first was a small silk pouch containing an omamori, a traditional Japanese protective charm. The fabric was faded and worn, clearly carried for many years. The second item was a military challenge coin, heavy and metallic. On one side was the Delta Force insignia. On the other, a serial number and the words "Quiet Professionals." Beneath these items was a letter handwritten on plain paper. Yamamoto unfolded it and began to read. Dear Detective Yamamoto, I hope this letter finds you well. I've been meaning to write for months, but finding the right words has been difficult. I'm not good at this sort of thing. 20 years in the military teaches you to write mission reports and tactical assessments, not personal letters. I'm back in the United States now. Virginia, to be specific. Chez Fort Bragg, though they've renamed it recently. I've been assigned to the training command, just as I expected. My days now are spent teaching new candidates the skills they'll need to survive in the field. It's important work, and I'm grateful for it. But I won't lie to you. It's also a constant reminder that my time as an operator is probably over. The injuries I sustained before coming to Japan never fully healed. The doctors say I can still serve, but not in the same capacity. Not jumping out of helicopters, not kicking down doors, not doing the things I spent 10 years perfecting. At first I was angry about this. Felt like I was being put out to pasture, but lately I've started to see it differently. The omamori I've sent you belonged to my mother. She gave it to me when I joined the military. Told me it would keep me safe, bring me home. I carried it through every deployment, every mission, every moment when I thought I might not make it through. And somehow it worked. I'm still here. Scarred, broken in places, but alive. I want you to have it now. Not because I don't need protection anymore, but because you helped protect something more valuable. You helped protect the last connection I had to my mother. Even if it was only for a brief moment. Those 6 months in Japan, living in that apartment, walking those streets, eating at those restaurants, they gave me something I didn't know I needed. They gave me peace. Even if it didn't last, even if it ended badly, I got to feel close to her again, and that's worth more than I can express. The challenge coin is from my unit. We give them to people we respect, people who understand what we do even if they don't wear the uniform. You earned this, Detective. You were just doing your job that morning, following the evidence, protecting your community. The fact that you showed respect afterward, that you listened to my story, that you treated me like a human being and not just a classified asset, that meant everything. I need to tell you something else. Something I couldn't say in that coffee shop because I was still too angry, too hurt. The incident that forced me to leave Japan also gave me clarity about my future. I've decided to retire from active service. Not immediately, but within the next year. I've given 20 years to the military. It's time to give something back to myself. I don't know what comes next. Maybe I'll teach at a military academy. Maybe I'll write. Try to share some of what I've learned without compromising classified information. Maybe I'll finally go back to school and become something other than a soldier. But whatever I do, I want to do it as myself. Not as Captain Tanaka Morrison. Not as an operator. Just as Yuki. The person I was before the military. The person my mother knew. The person I'm trying to find again. There's been an unexpected positive outcome from our incident. You probably saw the news coverage. It spread far beyond Japan, all the way back to the United States. Young women have been reaching out to me. Some are in the military already, asking for advice about special operations selection. Others are considering joining, inspired by the story. A few just wanted to say thank you for proving it was possible. I never wanted to be a symbol, never wanted the attention. But maybe that's not my choice to make. Maybe breaking barriers means accepting that other people will see your path and decide to follow it. If my story helps even one young woman believe she can do difficult things, can push past the people who say she can't, can achieve something she dreams about, then maybe all the pain was worth something. The military is changing. Slowly, but it's changing. There are more women in combat roles now. More women in special operations. More women proving every day that gender doesn't determine capability. I like to think I played a small part in that change. Not because I was the first or the best or the strongest, but because I refused to quit. Even when it hurt. Even when it seemed impossible. Even when everyone said I should give up. I think about those neighbors sometimes. Mrs. Kobayashi with her kind smile. Mr. Ishida who just wanted a good night's sleep. Even Mr. Watanabe, despite everything. They were just regular people trying to live their lives, and I disrupted that. I hope they're okay now. I hope the building is quiet again. I hope they've forgotten about the strange woman in apartment 304. But I hope you don't forget, Detective. I hope you keep that omamori and that coin somewhere visible. Not because I want you to remember me specifically, but because I want you to remember that things aren't always what they seem. That the quiet neighbor might be carrying secrets. That the small woman doing her grocery shopping might be a warrior. That everyone has a story, and sometimes those stories are bigger and stranger than we could imagine. I often think about what you said in the coffee shop. That I belonged in Japan too. That my mother's heritage was my heritage. You were right, even if I couldn't see it then. I do belong there. Maybe not as a resident, maybe not living in that apartment, but in a deeper way. Japan is in my blood, my language, my memories of my mother. No one can take that away from me. Not hostile intelligence services, not military protocols, not even my own doubts. Someday, when I'm no longer active duty, when I'm just a regular person again, I'd like to come back. Visit properly this time. See more than just one neighborhood in Tokyo. Maybe travel to Osaka, where my mother was born. Walk the streets she walked as a child. Try to understand the journey that brought her to America, and the journey that brought me back. If I do return, I hope we might meet again. Not as detective and suspect, not as police and soldier, just as two people sharing tea, talking about life, maybe finding some of that peace we both seem to be searching for. Until then, please take care of yourself. Keep doing the good work you do. Keep protecting your community. Keep being the kind of officer who treats people with dignity, even in difficult circumstances. The world needs more people like you. With gratitude and respect, Yuki Tanaka Morrison, Captain, U.S. Army, soon to be retired. Yamamoto read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it back in the box. He picked up the challenge coin, feeling its weight in his palm. Heavy, solid, real. A symbol of sacrifice and service from people who operated in shadow so others could live in light. He placed the coin on his desk, right next to his badge and his coffee mug. The omamori he tucked carefully into his jacket pocket, close to his heart. That afternoon, during his break, Yamamoto walked to a small shrine near the police station. He lit incense and said a prayer. For Yuki's mother, who'd crossed an ocean for love. For Yuki herself, who'd spent 20 years fighting battles most people would never know about. And for all the quiet warriors out there, the ones who served in silence, who sacrificed in secret, who protected people who would never know their names. A week later, news broke internationally. The U.S. military announced a new initiative to increase recruitment and retention of women in special operations forces. The program would be named after several pioneering female operators, though most names remained classified. But Yamamoto saw Yuki's influence in it, saw her story changing the institution she'd served. A month after that, Japan's own self-defense forces announced similar changes to their special forces selection process, opening more opportunities for women. Progress slow but steady, barriers falling one by one, and on Yamamoto's desk, the challenge coin caught the light every morning, reminding him of a spring morning when his ordinary life had intersected with something extraordinary, when a quiet neighbor had turned out to be a warrior, when a routine investigation had become a lesson in courage, sacrifice, and the price of service. He never forgot that lesson, never forgot Yuki Tanaka, and whenever young officers asked him about the coin on his desk, he'd tell them the story. Not all of it. Some parts remained classified. But enough. Enough to help them understand that heroes don't always look like what we expect. That strength comes in many forms. That the most important battles are often fought by people we'll never see, in places we'll never know about, for reasons we'll never fully understand. Years later, long after Yamamoto had retired from the police force, he received one more letter from Virginia. Just a short note, but it made him smile. Dear Detective Yamamoto, I'm coming home. I've retired from the military, and I'm moving to Osaka next month. Finally ready to walk in my mother's footsteps. Finally ready to find the peace we both deserve. If you're ever in the area, I'd love to buy you that tea. Best wishes, Yuki. Yamamoto kept that letter too, in the wooden box with the omamori and the coin. Treasures from a friendship formed in the strangest of circumstances. Proof that even in a world of secrets and shadows, human connection could still break through. And on his next trip to Osaka, he did meet her for tea. They talked for hours, two ordinary people sharing extraordinary memories, finding peace together in a city that finally felt like home.